you want to introduce yourself and get us going with recognizing our sponsors and introducing our presenters today. That'd be great. Thanks.
Okay, welcome everybody for attending. My name's Dwayne Tuggle. I'm the mayor of the town of Amherst and I'm president of VAPDC. So I'd like to welcome everybody today because today begins the summer series of the virtual offerings, which we are collectively calling Mondays at Midday. We're glad to kick off our three-part series with a session titled Rural and Suburban Data Dashboards. We're going to see demonstrations of recently released Rural Virginia Opportunity Dashboard, which is an interactive platform providing access to data, locality profiles, and catalog funding of opportunities. Then we will learn about Nova Flood Map, which is an online platform for providing open access to near real-time participation data or precipitation data from multiple sources. But before we launch into our presenters, I want to thank our sponsors, our training sponsors, Riverlink Group and B&B Consultants. Our Commonwealth partner is Virginia Housing, and our Virginia partners are Empower Broadband, Appalachian Regional Commission, Virginia Resource Authority, Virginia Risk Sharing Association, VACORP, Timmons Group, Dewberry, River Street Networks, and American Farmland Trust. Now on to our presenters for today. First up, we're going to have Chandler Vaughn, who today is wearing his Center for Rural Virginia Consultants hat. Chandler is also known to many of us for his work with the State Office of Broadband. He recently unveiled the Rural Virginia Opportunity Dashboard and is here to share it with us today. He will be followed by Nora Jackson, who is a resiliency planner with Northern Virginia Regional Commission. Nora will be speaking about their new flood map platform. Thanks to both of you for participating today. Chandler, it's all yours right now.
Thank you, Dwayne. I appreciate the introduction and the context. Can you guys hear me okay? I'm plugged into one of these computer docks, so a lot of times it doesn't transfer over the volume correctly. Okay, good. I'm getting a thumbs up. Yeah, it's good to see a lot of familiar faces here from my work in the broadband office, and in my free time, you could say it's been a pleasure to work with the Virginia Rural Center to launch this dashboard product to help rural communities across the Commonwealth and really rural leaders from local governments, private sector, nonprofits better understand what the needs are in their community, better understand what they're good at, and then also tap into funding opportunities to leverage those things. That's what the dashboard is in a nutshell. So I've got a brief overview presentation about the concept of the dashboard, and then I'll get into an actual demonstration of the tool itself, and hopefully to wrap up around midway through the hour, so there's plenty of time for the next presenter as well. Before I get going, I just want to briefly talk about the Virginia Rural Center as an organization. I hope that folks on the call are familiar with our work at the Virginia Rural Center, but the organization itself was created back in the early 2000s as a way to bring attention and bring focus to the unique needs and opportunities that are presented in the rural areas of the Commonwealth. Specifically, it was in the areas of economic and community development the organization was focused in on. And it's a statewide, rurally focused organization. So it's actually comprised of two different groups. One is the Council for Rural Virginia, which is a nonprofit arm. The other one is the Senator Frank M. Ruff Jr. Center for Rural Virginia, which is the state-created organization. Of course, the late Senator Frank Ruff bears the namesake of that organization. And a lot of the success of the Rural Center as a whole is attributable back to Senator Ruff of Mecklenburg County. So the Rural Center over the last few years has kind of been evolving in its value for rural Virginia. It's primarily been a convener of rural stakeholders and bringing folks together through a primary event called the Governor's Summit on Rural Prosperity. Hopefully a lot of you folks have been to that event in the past. If you haven't, you should be. Hope to see you there this year. It's going to be in October. Can't say the exact date and location yet, but it will be in October this calendar year coming up. So looking forward to hosting that. The other things that the Rural Center has done, though, and brought into the portfolio over the last couple of years, one is the Virginia Rural Leadership Institute, If you know of any budding leaders or mid-career leaders out there in rural communities that are passionate about making a difference, this program's for them to learn about what other communities across the state are doing to advance economic and community development in their rural communities. So that program's actively going on in its fourth year now. And then what we're going to talk about today, the Rural Virginia Opportunity Dashboard, is a product for rural communities that we refer to it in a lot of different ways, but ultimately I hope that it comes across to you folks as a time saver and a resource to make your jobs easier and bring in more resources back to your communities, and better understand what the needs are and strengths are of a county or city in your areas that you serve as PDCs. So I've hinted towards a lot of these opener slides here already and kind of these opening remarks, but just to try to frame up what the vision was here of the board of directors of the Virginia Rural Center. And I should say too, I'm not sure if Patrick Monty is on this call. I know he's of course engaged with the PDCs across Virginia, but Patrick is a board member of ours and was really involved in helping put the concept of this together. And what it rests on really are kind of two key things. It's that we know that rural areas understand what their strengths and opportunities are, but maybe there's a better way to understand those, right? And I'll get into this in the demonstration later on, but a lot of the times in rural communities, just to pick a random thing, right? You might hear about a shortage of primary care physicians. Not a lot of folks that are going to open up practices, a lot of practices closing for primary care physicians in rural areas. We know that's a need. But there's probably a better way to understand that in terms of the data, right? You can't just go to a funder or a philanthropist or an organization that offers funding proposals to go to them and say, hey, we have a shortage of primary care physicians. You usually need to attach a number to that. That was one thing to better understand the needs. The other thing is that we know there's a lot of different funding opportunities out there for rural communities, grants, loans, that could be from state government organizations, local organizations, philanthropic groups, nonprofits. But a lot of the times we hear that those funding streams are not as well tapped into in rural areas as they might be in urban areas. So the concept we put together through this dashboard are really bringing all those together, clearly communicated, clearly listed, data-driven insights, also areas of need in rural counties and cities across the state, and then also putting together funding opportunities to where users of this dashboard tool can clearly see what data there is out there available to better understand their communities, but also if the data, for example, is around health needs or health disparities, there's also a page for health-related funding opportunities that you can use and chase down to address those needs. What that's looked like and what the inspiration behind all of this is in terms of functionality is really across three different existing platforms that I hope that you all have used in your work already. One of them is just the Census Bureau data dashboard, right? There's a lot of dense statistics and dense measurements on the Census Bureau dashboard. Wanted to make sure that we had those statistics incorporated and listed in that kind of clear structure, clear format. We also wanted it to be interactive in terms of mapping, like you might have experienced on the Commonwealth Connection Broadband Availability Map. And in terms of the funding opportunities, we didn't want it to be an encyclopedia. We wanted it to be clearly listed, clearly understood, of a sentence summary or two of each funding opportunity along with its title with more detail if you drill down into it. So what I'm going to do now is toggle over to the dashboard itself. And this is fully live. You're welcome to go use it or toggle through it during the presentation. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you want to diverge here and use it yourself and join back later. But the website for the dashboard is cfrv.org/RVOD. I'll go ahead and put this in the chat in the Zoom meeting so everybody can have access to that link. I think I'm having trouble getting back to the chat in this presenter view, so I'll do that later. But if you go to the website, cfrv.org/RVOD, brings you to this page here. You can access the dashboard through this link. When you get to the dashboard, it presents a fork in the road, like I was talking about previously. There's a data side, and then there's also a funding opportunity side. So I'll go first to the data side of everything. And you'll see on this dashboard, they're initialized as a map. to better understand, the differences and variations across rural communities. The initial statistic listed is total population, and I should say here too, as a note, this map is not limited to just rural communities. I think to build context, to build understanding, we don't just limit this to rural communities themselves. Also, urban jurisdictions are listed on here. You can see Fairfax County, the most populated county in the states, listed on this dashboard in the deep blue color there, with 1.1 million people in Fairfax. But if you scroll around the state and hover over a given county, you can also see the population there, right? So this is just one statistic, but packed in with a lot of data into this dashboard product for folks to better understand the needs and opportunities in their community. And so the different statistic categories are over here on the left side of the page. So it goes from general demographics of total population, population under the age of 18, individuals between 18 and 64, working age, individuals over 65, number of households, for example. There's different categories across the board. So I think there's about 50 different statistics in this list. I think it's about 8 different categories. So you see demographics, financial stability, housing, education, business and employment statistics, healthcare information, and then statistics about broadband indicators. We have a broadband availability map baked into this, and we're going to be adding more infrastructure layers to it. But this also includes other statistics like in households without a computing device or households without internet subscription. But let's go back to the example that I mentioned previously and kind of the warm up to this, and that was primary care physicians. So just to put a data point on this and show you all how this is broken down, what the data point here in this instance is primary care physicians per 100,000 residents. We didn't come up with this title. We didn't come up with the classification. We pull this data from other external resources and put it all in one place. So this is what that would look like with the primary care physicians per 100,000 residents. That helps normalize the statistic, right? Because naturally there's going to be more primary care physicians in Albemarle County, where the UVA health system is based out of, than it would be in Buckingham County. But this helps you, start to get a better understanding of, in this in particular instance, where there are primary care physicians. Bland County, no reported primary care physicians in Bland County. Next door in Pulaski, there are 33 reported. This is 33, though, per 100,000 residents, right? So you may have to do a little back of the napkin math, but if Pulaski County only has 50,000 people in it, then that means there's, 17 or so primary care physicians. So you can see different categories across the board here, and it begins to, show cross analysis across different statistic categories. So let's look at primary care physicians compared against county health outcomes, right? This is another data point that we've got the source data cited in another page that I'm going to go to next, but you can see this county health outcome data with the grade that's given per each county. It takes a little bit more research to fully understand what these county health outcome ranks are. And I'll get into where that is in the next category. Let's see here. Anybody on the call that's close to the mute button, just holler out a city or county that you're interested in. Any takers?
Greensville County.
Greensville County. Okay. Thank you, Liz. So Greensville County, once you select a county, let's say you want to look at all these data categories all at once. So if you select a county, the Explore and Compare button pops up. I'm going to click that. That initializes a screen that's inspired by, I don't know if folks have used this in the past, but if you've ever used the Edmunds car comparison tool to compare different kind of year models of cars, this is what that is inspired by here. So if you pull up a county or a city, it gives you the different statistic areas that are available through this dashboard that you can see all in one place coming off of the map view. So I'm scrolling through this list here, Greensville County, just to continue on the same theme that we have been on, primary care physicians per 100,000. County health outcome ranks. So you can see here too, as I'm selecting these different categories, you can see the source data cited underneath them. So if you want to learn more about where we got this information from, dig a little bit deeper into that category, see if other data is available. We do have the source data, usually the URL, sometimes a searchable feature here, like a searchable Census Bureau data set that you can pop in and go look at further if you're interested in one particular category or another. Again, this helps you start to understand too, where some factors, some data points may influence others within a given county or city. We demoed this and we launched this about a month ago at the Southwest Virginia Economic Forum. And it was interesting to see in Southwest Virginia a lot of correlation, a lot of interesting data points around housing availability. So, for example, total housing units was pretty low. Average median rent was also pretty low. Home ownership rates were extremely high. So that's something, just an interesting thing to dig further into, right? Data doesn't tell the whole story, but it maybe would help figure out how to better tell a story, what to better look into on a qualitative side rather than quantitative. The next feature of this I'd like to highlight is that is the coalition building feature, as I like to call it, right? So Greensville County is in the same neighborhood as, let's say, Brunswick County, right? So I'm going to scroll through this comparison tool here, highlight Brunswick County, add that. And then on the other side of Greensville, I believe is Southampton. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on that one. So let's add Southampton County in here as well, right? This feature allows you to see what's similar, what might be different between neighboring jurisdictions. It also might allow you to see, more about a county that may be familiar halfway across the state, right? So perhaps Greensville County has something in common with Shenandoah County that may be initially seen on the map side of this dashboard product, but you can dig further into that. And maybe a Greensville County leader might see that Shenandoah County has done a tremendous job of addressing housing affordability, perhaps, maybe health outcomes. And somebody from Greensville County is picking up the phone and calling Shenandoah County to see what's going on there and helping move the needle in that jurisdiction. The last thing I'll point out on this side of the dashboard is that for the real nerds out there, you can also download this data set. It's available. As you click on the download button, it opens up an Excel spreadsheet and formats similar to how this is currently laid out here. That conceptually, you could pull all the data out of this. It might be 3 counties at a time, but you could pull all of the data out of this dashboard, use it for yourself, use it for your own purpose. The other side of this dashboard that I want to highlight. Actually, let's pause there for a second because this is two different sides of the dashboard. I'm about to go into funding opportunities. Are there any questions currently? Anything on the dashboard that you'd like me to click on, better understand? Just want to pause here in case there are any questions.
Yeah, well, I'll ask. I know this is a new tool, but what do you think you all will do as time goes by in terms of adding other categories of data or keeping it updated depending on the various data sources you've used? How are you going to address that?
Yeah, we've gotten some initial feedback on this, and it's all been really helpful and really good. I think that there's a lot of interest in doing, as this group would, I think, support regional analysis. If we can not only list where PDC borders are on the map, but also run the statistics by PDC region. There's a lot of interest in that being incorporated into the dashboard. Same thing with GOVA, GOVA regions across the state, 9 of those. Also, we've received a lot of interest in adding town data sets, which is a little more tricky because a lot of the time data available in these categories may not necessarily be available at the town level. But I think one of the most exciting things too is so right now we have the infrastructure layer of broadband coverage. This is, I think, about this data set, because the federal reporting cycle is about a year old now. It's going to be updated soon to get 6 months more up to date. But also on this infrastructure layer map, we're also going to be adding public water and public sewer availability and where that infrastructure does and does not exist across the Commonwealth. And I think that's going to help folks better understand which areas have more rural attributes than others, right? If you're relying on a well and a septic tank and you don't have broadband, you're pretty darn well rural. And that would be a better way to understand that. Also help local leaders understand where perhaps they may be more attractive to economic development sites than others in a rural jurisdiction, right? I mean, a lot of local government folks understand where the infrastructure exists, where it doesn't. But, for somebody coming in and utilizing this tool to better understand their area, that would be a tremendously insightful resource. So, across those four things, that's where this could go. Of course, this is driven by the board of directors at the rural center. So we've got to see what the will of the group is and what other good ideas there are out there to see what the next steps are here. Does that answer the question, David?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you. I see there's a question from Liz in the chat about if the data is downloadable into the spreadsheet.
Yep.
Yeah, I think he answered it proactively. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Yeah, for whatever reason, I can't access the chat. That's probably my own technological incapability. But if there are any others, please holler them out if they go through the chat, David. Okay, let's go to the funding opportunity side. So this funding opportunity side of the dashboard is meant to be kind of the second end of the continuum here, right? If a user is using the data side of it, the mapping side, hopefully they've identified some things that are strong suits that they can build on, or they've identified needs that they can address. And that's when they're coming over to this side of the dashboard to see what funding opportunities there are out there to address those needs, build on those strengths. Just to continue the same thread of the primary care position, right? I mean, one of the first opportunities that I've seen pop up on the dashboard currently is Centera Care's primary focus on social determinants of health, including skilled careers, food insecurity, mental health, and housing. So this is once you select that funding opportunity, here is more information about it. All of the key areas that folks that would be applying for this funding would care about, right? Total amount of funding available, average size of an award, who's eligible to apply, how often do they accept applications, when do they accept applications, who's the contact person for the grant opportunity, what's their phone number and email, what's the funding program website. So all of the things that you need to initially understand whether or not this is a good opportunity to pursue is right here in this one spot on the dashboard, and then more information, of course, through the program's website. Just to toggle back to funding opportunities, there are a lot of different opportunities currently listed. We've got 72 different grant programs, philanthropic resources on there currently. This is a list that's building and in development. This is a crowdsourced list. So we didn't go out and proactively source the data of different funding programs. We published a survey. That survey is actually on our website if you would like to distribute it yourself under the submit funding opportunities button. But we distributed that survey out. We got this information crowdsourced back from different state agencies, different philanthropic organizations, nonprofits. And this is the list as it exists currently. So you can expect this to be built on over the coming weeks and months as the dashboard gets more traction and gets out there further. So that's the product. And going back to the beginning, we hope that at the minimum, this is a time-saving resource for you to better understand communities, apply for funding opportunities. But on the real vision for this tool is it starts to help move the needle and bring more resources to rural jurisdictions of Virginia, right? I mean, a lot of the times you hear story of the county administrator or a local government employee is also wearing the hat of the economic development officer or emergency management personnel. And when you have 3 different hats or 5 different hats or 10 different hats, just like a small business owner might, there's not a lot of time in the day to think through, what's next or see what kind of needs and opportunities there are, and then apply for funding opportunities. So we hope this is a time saver for those folks. And then the ultimate goal would be to bring more resources to bear for rural communities in those areas of our mission, economic and community development across Virginia. So I'm happy to go back and rerun through anything if there are any questions. And just if David, if that's okay, if you have anything to want to open a Q&A session now or want to wait until the end of the conversation once the other presentation's done, just let me know.
Yeah, we can go ahead and do some questions. It seems like Liz has a question.
Yeah, Chandler, your last comment. Number one, this is really exciting. Number two, your last comment about, wanting to see rural localities be more successful in securing funding. Is there any step that the council has talked about in terms of trying to measure that? For example, how much grant funding comes into our rural localities today? How much will be there next year? Is there any source that tracks that, or is the intention for this tool to be able to help track that?
It's a good question. And Liz, I guess we should reveal for the group too that you're deeply involved with the Rural Center on the council side, I believe, as a board member. So
Yeah.
it's the goal there to better understand what resources rural communities ultimately bring to bear, I think can be a component of this tool. Going back to David's question, one of the potential features to think about in the future is also a storytelling component, right? This resource is very quantitative as it currently is, a lot of data, a lot of factual information. Doesn't have as much about on the storytelling side of, how a community used this tool to become more successful, to bring back resources there. So I think that's another component to think about incorporating here is, can we have communities that have used this dashboard successfully come back and tell the story about what the ROI was on the back end in tapping into a funding program? I hope that answers the question. And please jump into if you think any different or anything else. Okay.
I'm not seeing anything else in the chat, but is there anybody else that has a question for Chandler as we wrap up this part of the session? And certainly, if you think of something later, and there's some time at the end, looks like something's popped up in the chat. Oh,
And I
it's
put my
Chandler's.
email and then a link to the dashboard in there as well.
Okay, great, wonderful. All right, Chandler. Well, I hope you'll stick with us for the remaining time in case there are some questions, and we really appreciate hearing about this. Sounds really exciting. Sounds like a one-stop shop for data in a number of different areas, and then getting you started on looking for some resources. So really appreciate it.
Yeah, we hope so. And if you have feedback on what could be more useful, email me, right? I mean, if you guys have anything that you would like to be added, data points that could be more informative, feel free to shoot those over in an email, and I'll make sure those get voiced back up to see if we can incorporate them.
Great. All right. Thank you. All right. Well, we will move on now to Nora and hear about the NOAA flood map.
All right, thanks. Are y'all seeing my screen here with the slides and everything?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Well, thanks again for having me, everybody. I work as a resiliency planner for the Northern Virginia Regional Commission. So I'm up here in Northern Virginia, and it's kind of a perfect timing to talk about rainfall and flooding because of the storms that we had this weekend. So it worked out great for me. I was able to kind of record my demo yesterday and to kind of look at some of that recent rainfall. So that was really cool for me, especially people who nerd out about weather stuff. So we're going to get a little bit more technical here than what Chandler shared, but I really liked kind of his ending comment about the storytelling aspect, because I think that is also kind of really, really important to the work that we're trying to do in this region as well. So first, I'm just going to go over real quickly why we developed the platform and kind of how it came about in the first place. And then we're going to go through a demonstration, and I can show you how you can interact with the specific precipitation data. There's other weather data that's available as well, and how you can download it. And then I'll just close out with some additional capabilities and some next steps, because we do have the platform funded for 5 years. So we do have some long-term plans investigating some possibilities and other ways to kind of expand and make it even better for everybody. So the platform came about because events like this are becoming a lot more common. Many people may remember 2019 was a pretty severe event. Many call it like the wake-up call in particular for this region. There was a lot of damage, and it's all due to extreme rainfall. It's due to a lot of rain falling in a short period of time and overwhelming a lot of our stormwater management systems. And even, for example, you'll see a 4 Mile Run is that photo in the top right corner. Rose 11 feet in 1 hour. So we're really dealing with people's, this is very hazardous. This is people's lives, livelihoods as well. So it's a very serious issue. And so we really wanted to start looking into this. That storm, Fairfax County had to perform over 50 swiftwater rescues, right? So this is how, this is emergency management, emergency response side of things, more so than what we think of when we think of long-term planning, right? We're talking about this kind of immediacy and to all of these hazards. So we kind of wanted to bring it back and say, well, what has it been looking like? Where is the change? So we have the data to show for it, right? We have this comparison. This is a consistent methodology kind of comparing the storms from Fairfax County specifically, kind of central to our region. And you can see that spike and that increase. And it didn't used to be this common, right? And so people don't really understand the risk because we didn't used to have it as badly. And so they make decisions like drive into flooded roads because they don't really know any better. They don't understand the risk. So we started coordinating with some of our region's local government staff who work on planning for floods, floodplain managers, stormwater engineers, emergency managers, anyone who's in that realm. We learned that 3 of our jurisdictions were using the same company, the same equipment, and the same platform to set up their own rainfall runoff monitoring systems as a response to all of these flooding issues. But they did not know that they were using the same one, and they wanted to be able to share data because we know that rainfall does not stop at jurisdiction boundaries. And so being able to see what's going on around in your neighbors would be incredibly helpful. And so we saw an opportunity to kind of improve the data sharing, not only between our localities, but also to help educate the public about all the changing climate conditions that we're facing and the new flood hazards that are coming. Alexandria, for example, had already made their platform public. And so we kind of wanted to build off of that and bring everyone else in and make it available for everyone. And so we used funding from the Community Flood Preparedness Fund at the state to do kind of an audit to look at what was existing. And then we used congressionally directed spending request funding from Senators Kane and Warner to actually pay for the platform and build the platform itself. And so real quickly, if you wanted to pull it up or Google it, NOVA flood map, you can use that QR code to pull it up on your phone. And I'm sure I can drop it in the chat after I'm done with the presentation, but wanted to give everybody a chance to kind of pull it up on your computer or whatever you want to look at it. And before I kind of dive into the demonstration itself here. All right. Before I get started, you can kind of see at the very top, it's, NOVA Flood Map is the domain, but this Elements 360. So this is the name of the platform type. This is a multi-hazard management really for emergency response. And so this is what, emergency managers, emergency coordinators are going to be using for multiple hazards, not just rainfall. They use it for severe wind, lightning, and things like that. So this really wasn't originally designed to be public facing or to be used by everyone. It just so happens that this is kind of the best way for us to push all this information out there. So we'll go ahead and get started. This is like the main page that you come on when you look up NOVA Flood Map. You want to see what's going on, and you get a little bit of an introduction to the purpose of it, why we wanted to do it, and then a little bit on the top there, you're going to see making sure that I was not logged in as an admin. Every time someone comes in, it automatically logs them in as a guest, and that's how I'm able to tell how many people have been visiting the site since we launched it in March. It's really neat too because the map that is embedded on the front page, I kind of have it set to show 24-hour most recent rainfall. Completely interactive, completely useful, has all the functionality of the regular map page. So you don't have to go anywhere else. You can do it all there if you'd like. And then you can also, in the dropdown under rainfall maps, you can directly it'll open another tab to the map page to show you that 1 hour, 6 hour, 12 hour, whatever increment that you want to see automatically. That'll open a new tab. And then as well as additional resources, just another few extra places to go. This is something where we think we can build out a little bit more information. All right. And then as we go along, we go to the top, bookmarks. We don't have a ton going on. Dashboards, I will be showing at the very end. A site, that's just a list of all of those green dots that you see in the map. And so we're going to start with the map because this is the best way to view it and kind of go through everything. So like I said, all of those green dots is an example of a monitoring site. And each site can have multiple types of sensors at it. So it's not just collecting precipitation data. And I'm going to pause here briefly. So this view, so we're ingesting data from localities as well as, USGS, for example. And so this drop down here, if you want to look at the views, you can actually look at the sites based on which data input it's coming from. So I wanted to look at just Alexandria's. You can drop down, just look at Fairfax County, etc. That's kind of a good way to navigate if you're looking for a specific source or a specific location. But I also wanted to mention this legend, that icon. That's pretty consistent throughout the website. You'll see that as for a lot of the other pop-ups and things like that. But it's also important to mention that the icons here, so it's telling you that the gauge is operational, that it's collecting data, reporting it every 5 minutes. Timeout usually just means that there might be a bird's nest or some debris or something that is clogging the bucket, and it can't send that data out, or it's been such a long time since it recorded rain, the system said, I'm going to go to sleep and I'm not going to send anything out until it rains again and coming back online. The alarms, we do not have that capability built into ours. Like I said, other people may be using it. That's someone who might put in a threshold, for example, when it rains a certain amount, it might trigger to send an email to someone that they need to go check out a specific site. And then they can say, hey, I got it, I received it, I acknowledge the alarm, and I'm going to go check it out. On the top, we're going to go and you can find your sites as list here. You can toggle the names, but it's really busy because we have so many sites at this scale. That's a lot easier if you're just looking smaller scale. And you can search it if you know. And so that sensor list, it's also an icon to pay attention to, is going to show you all of the different types of sensors because, like I said, not just precipitation, it also has air temperature. We just added stage gauges, so that would be our flow or, our flooding. And the options here are something that I would have to build in more kind of on the administrative side, so you're not going to see much there. I have not built in any thresholds to air temperature on the administrative side. So if I click and toggle that on, it's just going to tell me I haven't done anything. So there are some pieces of this where you can really delve in deep that we haven't because we're taking a little bit of a broader approach. But for example, because we did just ingest this USGS stage data, they do have thresholds baked into there. So when I turn that on, you can actually see that in the legend, the National Weather Service stages of flood action and response there. I'm going to turn that off and then we'll go back to looking at all of them. Pretty simple. Everyone knows if you want to change your base map. But the most interesting thing is that we have all of these additional layers because all this stuff is available and the company is able to just ingest, whatever data sources are already out there publicly. And so there's some current observations for different types of weather data. Radar data, rainwater accumulation is particularly interesting. And you can also see what's happened in the past hour. So that's the time control. You see that time control icon to show you if it has a functionality for time. And so you can look at this. This was Sunday at about 1:30 yesterday. So this was showing how much rainfall had accumulated. Again, if you're looking at that icon right there, that's your legend. And then you can kind of see that legend pop up there in that left-hand corner. So again, those icons are really going to help lead you throughout the whole dashboard there. Oh, and I just clicked way farther than I wanted to. All right. Get back to it. So even though this rainwater accumulation that I turned on doesn't have the clock next to it indicating that it is does have a time component to it, you can still try it. It may not change much, but it kind of automatically rolls back. And like you can see, it was about 1:30. And then that toggle there shows you just the opacity of the layer. So you can change it, play around with that a little bit. So you can see what's going on underneath. But you can see that as that hour goes by, there's a little bit of action happening over on the left, but not a ton. So this isn't really probably the best for using the time control option under the additional layers. But as you can see, it still keeps going and automatically refreshing. Daily rain rate, it does have that that time toggle next to it. But even then, it still doesn't have a ton of change going on. But we know that we were getting quite a lot of rain this weekend. So you can kind of see how heavy it was and centralized over the region. Next, we're going to check out specific site and kind of dive into some of the data that is collected at that site. And so I have one in mind already that has both a precipitation gauge as well as a stage gauge. And so that is 4 Mile Run in Alexandria. And so you don't have to use this. You don't have to look it up. You don't have to know the name. You can also just hover over one of the sites as well. You can see, if I click on this, there's only one sensor there, right? You just see the rain increment for Lake Barcroft. That's the only sensor that's at that site. But I want to go back and we're going to look at 4 Mile Run because we can look at rain and stage. So we can kind of look at that response in the waterway. That icon is the sensor. Again, that's going to take you to a new page just looking at the rain increment data. You can look at a small graph to kind of show the past couple of days of that rainfall. We don't have a ton of extras in here, but you can look at the data in a different view. You can add notes, you can add photos, and again, that would show you thresholds there if you had any baked in, but I don't have any baked in as well. So we'll go back to kind of look at that graph. And then I want to go to the list of the sensors, right? So that's that gray up top. That shows you everything at that whole site. Whereas if I want to go to a specific sensor, the rain increment, for example, I would click on that sensor. I want to look at the graph. I want to see what's going on with the stage. And now we can see those different levels, those thresholds that we have baked in, those colors that you saw from the National Weather Service before. And again, that will take us back. Want to look at the rain increment. This is what we're really, really interested in collecting and looking at this information. So the best thing about this is that it reports every 5 minutes. And we know that there's a lot of variation in rainfall when it comes to that, that timeline. But a lot of times when it comes to planning, we're using very, very broad, very flattened out. You download it down here real quickly. This is going to download whatever you have set at the top. So this is showing about a week's worth of data. So as you see next to data, it says 2012. That means it's 2000 entries, right? So that's every 5 minutes, it's logging that amount. And so that's where you download it. And you can get it as a spreadsheet, CSV, tabular. But it's pretty hefty and it's quite a lot to look at. And so it is a lot easier to kind of look at just a couple of days at a time, one storm at a time. So that's kind of June 13th. That's when we got a lot of rain. And so I'm going to go up to the calendar there at the top and just look at the past couple of days to kind of see that Friday through Sunday. Again, this was like 1:30-ish on Sunday yesterday. So again, I'm looking at it was a ton of rain that fell, but it didn't all fall equally across that time span, right? Let's change the bin size. And so now we're actually looking at how much rain fell every 5 minutes and the variation within that time frame. And you can kind of see it's quite a bit different. And I'll pause briefly here also because you can kind of see at the top that max value. That's coming from there. That means that that was the max amount that one of them recorded in that 5-minute increment. But this is a little bit hard to see. I like the 15-minute better personally, just because it's a little bit easier on the eyes and you can kind of see register where it rained just a tiny bit. And now I want to look at the response. I want to see what the stage looked like. I can use that drop down and go to the stage gauge directly from here. And so this is showing the response that 4 Mile Run had to that rainfall. And so it's including those thresholds. It still has those 2 days that I previously selected. It's got the legend on, so you can kind of see at, what those action stages are. If I turn off the thresholds, it basically zooms in and you can kind of see to just look at the response of the stage itself, because that's how high it is to reach kind of that major flood status. And that's a pretty cool peak. I mean, we know that that's kind of when it rained was kind of Friday evening. But I want to look at all, I want to look at all together. We can look at the thresholds again. It kind of explains it for you. And again, you can download everything right there. Again, you're only downloading those 2 days that you had specified. And then click that graph icon. This is the cool part. This is where you can add data, and then we're going to overlay the precipitation data. There's some options down here that you can play with as well if you don't want to see some of those thresholds, if it's like, messing it up a little bit. So you go to that plus button to add, and I want to add that precipitation gauge, right? And so I know that it was 4 Mile Run near Alexandria, making sure that that's the one that I want. All right. I need to make sure that I add it before I graph it because it will show up there on your list. And then you hit graph, and it's preserved those settings that you had previously. It's still showing those 2 days, and it's showing the 15-minute increment as well. And so this was also really interesting because you're looking at runoff from exactly where it rained. Like, we know that this is influenced by a lot of other rainfall that happened upstream and probably much before this, right? But even just looking at what it was able to capture during that hour period that the rise happened, it's still pretty substantial, and we think pretty a powerful visual when it comes to learning about how rainfall can impact and flooding in our region. So you still have some of those capabilities there. And real quick, because I know we're gonna run out of time, so I'm gonna switch to the dashboard briefly. So the dashboard is very similar to what you would do with like ArcGIS. You have a topic specific idea that you want to kind of convey or show to folks. And so this is what I would say is our more public facing option. And this is what we can build. We can build other dashboards. And so this one is kind of specifically the rain gauges, a little bit more about like weather related. But this was the one that we were really excited to kind of get out and get in front of people. And so again, it's very simple. You just embed the map, and it's got a little bit more of a basic introduction. And so this one is showing the last reported rain increment, as well as some NOAA radar. So you can kind of see the timestamp there. It was about yesterday afternoon, and there was a little bit of radar coming in. Again, you still have all of the same functionality that you had with the other maps. You can add additional layers. You can look at those different sensor types. That's telling you that that's the one that you're looking at, the last reported rain increment. And so this is interesting because there's so many different types of radar that you can drop down and look at. I was zoom out a little bit so you can kind of see the storm that hit us last night, kind of coming across yesterday afternoon. And so I was kind of curious. I wanted to look at what some other radar might have looked like. And so you kind of put that on top, and you can kind of see the difference that different types of radar picks up, right? It's not always going to be 100% accurate. And so it's really interesting to look at all of those different layers that you have actively. You can look at the rainwater accumulation again. This was perfect weekend to show this because we got so much rain. And then the tiles down here, as I scroll down, this is each of these localities has one of these platforms, has AEM. And so I have set that it's going to show whichever is the most recent sensor that recorded the most rainfall. And as soon as it records rainfall, it changes color. So you can kind of see that automatically in live time when it's happening. This was yesterday, so the tiles didn't change color quite yet. But if you had it on now, I bet there might be a little bit of action happening. But these are just kind of your basic widgets. It's a little bit more, it's not as intuitive as using ArcGIS Online to do dashboards, but these are some of the pre-built ones. They had the National Weather Service story, the watches and warnings, kind of through air temperature up there as well. But we can really do a lot when it comes to these dashboards and how we organize it and what you can see, and then also what you can kind of program to visually look at to see the changes automatically when you do those colors. So, we want to think outside of the box with that. And Perfect timing. I think that is all done with the demonstration. And then I will just real briefly cover a few things that we want to do next, because it's not just the platform itself. Once we did it, I'm not done. We want to add some more outputs. So people who want to look at the data, ingest it, I think it would be really cool to set it up with the university. So we can do that. We can set up the data exchange outputs. Want to add some more stage gauges. There are a lot more sensors out there that we could be putting on there. And like I said, with the dashboards, the rain gauge dashboard is cool, but we could be doing something else that maybe is more of a public facing or public interest topic. We also have money left to purchase additional monitoring equipment. And so that's something that we're going to be working with some of our partners and localities if they're interested. Gauge adjusted radar rainfall is a really unique product that's specific to this company. And so they combine that radar data with what the rain gauges collect on the ground. And it comes with a much more accurate and much more granular view of how much rain fell where, which also helps when it comes to that post-event analysis. So you can look at what happened during an event and what it impacted so that you can plan accordingly for something next time and make those changes. So, long term, we have 5 years. And so there's a lot that we can do in those 5 years in general. It just helps teach us about sensor management and reporting, and also being able to use that real information to calibrate our models or to ground truth some of our models. Long-term network planning. If you can believe it, yes, there are people who, different agencies, different groups, would not know it and put a gauge a mile away from each other, when really they could have been working together to put one in the most optimum place, right? And also that GAR product, that gauge adjusted radar rainfall, being able to do that on a regional scale to kind of eliminate that, middleman. Our localities are already purchasing it individually, so why not kind of expand that and maybe give us some cost savings in the process. Most importantly is maintenance. That's the one thing that everyone drills into your head, is that rain gauges require a lot of maintenance, and we have a ton all in the same region. So wouldn't it make sense if we all kind of came together to come up with a maintenance plan? Again, cost savings and reducing that workload on some of our localities. All right, and just a few minutes left. I'd be happy to go into the platform if anyone has specific questions, but you can also pop into the chat. I'd be happy to chat further if you wanted to send me an email too. So I know we only have a few minutes left, but thank you.
Nora. I'm a weather junkie, so I really was interested
Oh, good.
in this. Question for you, for localities, that they have emergency management departments, or, I know some of our regions that are involved with, public safety and emergency management at a regional level. If somebody was interested in doing this, another part of the state, what would you recommend of them, that they do? Interacting with you as a first step, talking with the company, what advice would you have if folks wanted to replicate what you're doing there?
I think the first step is working directly with the localities about what they have on the ground or what their needs are, because that's kind of really where it came from, was several of our localities already had it. And so we were like, let's take what's already there and kind of leverage those existing investments that they had already made to make that platform. So that's where I would say the first step is. If people want to work on the same network, the same platform, and working with the same company, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to try to make some connections with some of our other jurisdictions up here as well, might be able to help. So always happy to share whatever we can.
Thank you. Other questions for Nora? I do see there was a question in the chat. I think this was for Chandler. If you're still on, Chandler wanted to know what software was used for the data visualization.
We worked with the Virginia Tech Center for Geospatial Information Technology, the same team that put together the broadband availability map. I'd have to take that question back to them about the specific software design, though.
All right, thank you. Any other questions before we have Dwayne wrap us up? All right. Well, thank you both, Dwayne.
All right. Well, I would like to thank Chandler and Nora for sharing their online tools, and their expertise with us. Note that our next training event will be a virtual presentation and discussion of working for and with local government. That'll be in about 2 months on Monday, August 18th, and you sure want to make it if you can. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.